Well, we're talking tonight in New York, today here in Australia, to Austin Ruse, who's the boss of CFAM in the New York at the United Nations, which is the big pro-life organization. Perhaps I should say small, but certainly big from the point of view of it's the only one, working for life, family, freedom, faith, protecting children, protecting family. And they've been doing this for many, many, many years, and we thank God for them. In fact, Canberra Declaration is actually given to these guys before. We really appreciate what you do, Austin. Austin, tell us a bit about yourself.
About me personally, or about CFAM?
And your work. You and your work, yeah.
Well, we started CFAM in August of 1997, if you can imagine, that long ago. And we were founded by a Canadian by the name of Teresa Bell, who was executive director of Human Life International Canada. And she actually went to the Cairo conference and the Beijing conference. So in a way, CFAM has been active since 94, 95. And we were founded in the summer of 97 to monitor and try to affect the pro-life and pro-family debate at the United Nations. At that time, there were no pro-life groups that had been accredited, although I think National Right to Life had been. But for the most part, the pro-life groups were not accredited. They went on the badges of other organizations, and they lived in a little bit of fear that they would never be accredited. All that eventually passed. But we have been active in UN negotiations since that time. The main thrust of our work is assisting UN delegations in negotiating documents and making sure that an international right to abortion is not established through UN resolutions or treaties, to ensure that the family is not redefined, to fight against comprehensive sexuality education. Our warrant is to fight against the sexual revolution being imposed on the world by the UN. And we've gotten, I have to say, quite good at it. And when I say we, I don't really mean me. I mean the people that work at CFAM, because they know exponentially. It's embarrassing on staff calls because half the time I don't even understand what they're talking about. They're so deep in the negotiations that I'm a little bit lost. So the team that we have at CFAM, and each of them have been around just about 10 years each. And there are 6 of us. And it's quite remarkable what 6 people can do over a series of years in stopping the bad guys at the United Nations. Because you know what? There's not an international right to abortion. They haven't redefined the family. We've even got a good definition of gender, going back now more than a decade. So this team has done quite well.
Well, congratulations to you, Austin. We really appreciate you and appreciate the team. Tell us a bit about yourself, though. How did you get involved? What's your background?
Well, I was here. I'm going to turn my phone off because it's making a little bit of noise. I spent 12 years in the magazine business in New York City. I worked at Fortune, Forbes, The Atlantic Monthly, Rolling Stone, on the business side of all those magazines. And I had a religious conversion. I converted to the Catholic Church in 1985, and those were also the Reagan years. And I had a political conversion also. I was a little bit of a Democrat for many, many years. And after my religious conversion, I wanted to do something serious for my faith, and started volunteering my time. I left the magazine business and started volunteering my time for a Catholic priest in New York City. And one day at breakfast after Mass, there was a young lady there who was from Canada. And she said that her boss had raised some money to open up a pro-life lobbying group at the UN. And it was like I heard bells ringing. And I told her on the spot that that was my job, because she was there looking for people to staff it. And a couple of weeks later, it was. And I've never looked back.
Wow, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I think I met some of you guys at the World Congress of Families in Utah in 2015.
Oh, yeah. I was just, on Facebook, one of the cool things about Facebook is they have this thing called memories. And so it kicked up a couple of days ago photographs from the conference, from that conference. My wife speaking, me speaking, other people speaking. So yeah, that was a few years ago at this time.
Yeah, it was at this time, and it was a great conference, a very, very significant conference. There's been a very amazing thing happen in the UN on the 22nd of October. 32 countries, now 33 countries, thankfully it's growing, got together and signed the Geneva Consensus Declaration. As I understand it, this is absolutely historic. A consensus for life, for family, for protecting every nation's national sovereignty in global politics, strengthening the family as the foundational unit of society. Now, those words are very strong, coming out of the UN / these group of nations who are associated with the UN. Tell us more about it. What do you think about it? Is it that historic? Is it that important?
Well, it's something that the Pro-Life and Pro-Family Coalition has been working toward for a quarter of a century, hoping that one day that a bunch of nations would get together and make such a strong statement. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you're aware of something called the San Jose Articles. They are at sanjosearticles.com, sanjosearticles.org also. And that was a document that a bunch of us produced, law professors, activists, journalists, in San Jose, Costa Rica in 2011, which kind of did the same thing, that basically asserted that there's no international right to abortion, and anybody who asserts that is flat out wrong. That was an NGO document. This is more important because it's a governmental document, and it's something that was put together mostly by a team. And you would think it would be at the State Department, but it was mostly a team at our Department of Health and Human Services, spearheaded by people we've known for many, many years who are now in the government. And it makes a number of very important points. First of all, it's very important that governments have done it. And we are assisting the US in figuring out how to inject this into the UN system. And I think it'll basically be just be a transmittal document to the Secretary General, and therefore broadcast to the whole UN. But the importance of this is that they were governments that did it, 31 governments, or 32 governments, now 33. And it asserts that there's not an international right to abortion, and that this particular contentious issue has to be left up to member states to decide on their own. That's vitally important, because the United Nations, I don't want to say the United Nations, various UN agencies and a whole lot of UN member states have been trying for many, many years to establish a global right to abortion through UN documents. They have failed to get it in a treaty, and they knew that they never could. So they've tried to do it in what's known as soft law, and that is the repetitious use of certain phrases, reproductive health and reproductive rights primarily. And so they have tried to put that in countless documents over the years. One of the remarkable things about the Trump administration is that they actually, in recent months, drew a bright line around the phrase reproductive health and reproductive rights, and determined that they would either delete it or define it, or put in another term that would stand in its place, like general basic medical care. And so this itself was an incredibly important advance for the Trump administration, drawing this bright line around these terms that have been used euphemistically for abortion. So here they come with this consensus document of 32 member states, and it does that in spades. So that's why it's important, and it also mentions the fundamental, family is a fundamental group unit of society, which the other side has been fighting against now for a long time. So this is a very significant move. We're hoping that it will grow to more than 33. We hope it'll grow to 50 or 60, and there's a good chance that it will. And when we move off of this, there was also two pieces of really amazing news that came out of the Trump administration today on this particular issue. But we can get to that in a moment. So yes, this was historic.
Look, just before we actually go to this latest breaking news, which is very exciting, by the way, to put it in context, Justin, we here in Australia have been fasting and praying for 31 days, finishes today, the 31st of October, 2020, for a breakthrough for life. And we were thinking more in terms of our own nation, the situations we face. We've got a very important election in Queensland today, actually, as we speak. There's been important elections in the ACT. We've listed the New Zealand election and also the American election, which takes place in a few days' time on the 3rd of November.
Oh boy, oh boy.
That's a big one. That's a huge one. It's just massive, massive,
Yeah.
massive. But we weren't expecting what's happened. We've had two, I believe, major breakthroughs in this period of 31 days of prayer and fasting. First of all, Amy Coney Barrett, and I think she's a very godly, like I can't see her moving and shifting. She's just absolutely rock solid for God and for family and for life. She's been appointed to the Senate, which is absolutely historic. I believe she will be I don't know, maybe you get a comment from you on this. I just got the feeling that she could be a leader in the High Court, in the Supreme Court. And the other thing, of course, is this amazing declaration. And those two things have happened in this time of our prayer. And so we're so excited, and it's so good to talk to you. What comment about Amy Coney Barrett? What do you think about her?
Well, I know people who know her well for many, many years, and everything you hear about her is quite amazing. I don't know if you watched the hearings, but she sat there for 2 solid days, for hours, answering their questions without a single note. There's that famous photograph of her. She was asked what one of the senators said, look at my desk. We've all got these big packets of information and questions, and what do you have on yours? And it was a blank piece of paper. And there's this picture of her holding it up, and it's blank. And people are filling in on memes and things, what it might have said or what they wanted to say. So she sat there for 2 solid days, and with almost an encyclopedic photographic memory of her cases and of the Constitution, talked in minute detail about her judicial philosophy. It was a tour de force performance by Amy Coney Barrett. So, she's a faithful Catholic. She's got a bunch of kids. We are extremely hopeful. Justice, the Chief Justice has been something of a disappointment. But the others have not yet. There is a chance that Roe v. Wade could be overturned. And, if that happens, man, oh man, it's going to send shockwaves around the world, and certainly around the United States. It's going to be quite astounding if and when that happens. And, and if you all keep your prayers going on Tuesday or shortly thereafter, Donald Trump could be elected to another 4-year term. And if that's the case, he might get 2 or 3 more Supreme Court picks in the next 4 years. I mean, this will be the Trump court. It's amazing to think that is a possibility. I just published a book called The Catholic Case for Trump that just came out in August. And one of the things I say about Donald Trump is that he has been pro-life in a granular way. That is to say, he's done more than simply reinstitute Mexico City policy, which forbids American money from going to groups overseas that promote or perform abortions. He reinstituted Mexico City policy, and then he expanded it from the family planning budget, which is relatively small, to the entire health budget in our foreign aid. He defunded UNFPA, which is easy for Republicans to do. But then he's done all of these granular things that most people have no idea that he has done, like drawing a bright line around reproductive health at the United Nations. Nobody, he didn't do that for the grandstands. He didn't do that, for the base, because the base doesn't even know. I know, people who do this work on a regular basis know. But it's and the best word that I use to describe it is granular. He does these minute things that people will never know about because he's hired all the right people, and he lets them do their job along the lines that he has laid out. And he is the most pro-life president that we've ever had. So in answer to your question about Amy Coney Barrett, she very well could be the driving force to overturning Roe v. Wade. But I think there's more to come on that score, more to come.
Yeah, it's just amazing. Just very quick question. What do you think drives him? Because he was actually pro-abortion
Yeah.
maybe 10, 15 years ago. Some people say it's Melanie that's really strongly pro-life. What are your thoughts about that?
You know, as I say in the book, and I believe that he has never really cared about this issue at all. If he was pro-choice, he was vaguely pro-choice, sort of knee-jerk pro-choice, because he was, you know, a New York businessman. But I don't think that he has ever cared about this issue. Therefore, he's not been doctrinaire. Therefore, it was easier for him to follow the people who were pro-life and who were supporting him. And I also say that he has never really cared for the approval of the elites. You know, George Bush, for instance, said he was pro-life, but he never did the granular things that this man did. And the people around him cared about the New York Times and the Washington Post and the television networks. But I don't think Trump gives two hoots. And what that means is that he has been able to let the pro-lifers in the administration have their way. And that's why we have something like the Consensus Declaration, the Geneva Consensus Declaration. That's why he has this bright line around reproductive health. And that's why there were these two major announcements just a few hours ago. May I tell you about them? They both came out of the U.S. Agency for International Development, which over the years has been among the most wicked U.S. agencies in Washington, D.C. I mean, the font of, you know, the imposition of the sexual revolution around the world, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars in contraception, forcing governments to change their laws. I mean, it's been a truly wicked agency. But there are good people there now, including a woman who lives about a half a mile from me named Bethany Cosma, who is a young evangelical woman with 3 kids. And she was hired. There was a big stink when she was hired. And she's been very important in making the pro-life case within the Trump administration and making the pro-life case on behalf of the Trump administration at the UN. So that was a little background. But what they announced today was that the United States, you know, there's this thing called Mexico City policy. It's never had enforcement. And they announced a huge regime of enforcement, such that not only do they say that the recipients of U.S. aid money overseas can't use it to perform or promote abortions, they now have teeth in that regulation, and they are going to make people show that they are not doing it, and it will come with enforcement, an enforcement mechanism. This is a huge deal because in the past, you know, Mexico City policy was a policy, but it was never really enforced, and now it will be enforced. The second thing that happened this afternoon, and we just did a special issue Friday Facts that came out about 2 hours ago. It'll probably be in your inbox. The second thing is that John Barsa, who's the acting director of the U.S. Agency for International Development, sent a scathing letter to the Secretary General telling him that U.S. money cannot be used at the UN for promoting abortion. And he says, and we know that that's happening and it has to stop. So these two things happened this afternoon, and they never would have happened under a pro-life Bush administration because they had their eye on other things, you know, and Trump has his eye on doing the things that contribute to the common good. And certainly these things are. It has been a quite remarkable day, coming on the heels of Amy Coney Barrett, coming on the heels of the Geneva Declaration, and heading into the election on Tuesday.
So you would say these two things that have just occurred this afternoon, literally announced this afternoon, are New York time, are just as significant as those other two?
I would say so, yes, because the enforcement of Mexico City policy means that money will actually be withheld if organizations, if it is discovered that they are performing or promoting abortion, and we know that happens. And we also know that it happens at the United Nations. You know, the United Nations is one of the bigger promoters of abortion in the world, and John Barsa of USAID said this has to stop. And the implied threat is the withdrawal of U.S. money, which is one thing that we have been pushing for.
And look, last question, because I know it's late at night and Friday night, so I do appreciate your time. This whole thing just seems to be just unbelievable in so many different ways. I would describe this, and tell me if I'm right in saying this, that this Geneva Consensus Declaration and what's happened this afternoon with these two other very important announcements are virtually like a shot across the bow of the United Nations. You have to change, because if you don't change, there's going to be something very serious happen. That was a common thing in naval warfare, that they didn't fire a shell at the ship. They said, okay, this is a shot across the bow, the next one's coming for you. The other thing is, to answer this question, as I understand, the America provides about 90% plus of UN funding. Is that the case? It's quite possible that America could say, well, listen, we're going to take the funding away from the UN.
Well, the U.S. Doesn't pay for 90%. The U.S. pays for 22% of the general budget, which is significant. Because if that was withdrawn, that would cripple the United Nations if they lost 22% of their funding. And the U.S. contributes significantly more for the blue helmets, the UN security forces. So I don't know how, when you put them two together, what it gets up to, but it's significant. So yeah, you're exactly right. It is a shot across the bow. At the end of the day, if Trump is not reelected, it will all be for naught. But, I am confident at this point that Trump is going to win. And you probably do not hear that in your media down there. But
correct.
I'm confident that he's going to win. Everything is going his way. There are these spontaneous what they call Trump trains that are happening all over the country, which are people getting in boats and cars and driving together through town with the Trump flags flying. There was a Trump train in Miami last month of 30,000 cars. And these things are happening all over the country. And in a couple of days, on Sunday, there's going to be a Trump train on the Beltway going around Washington, D.C. And I would bet there'll be 10,000, 20,000 cars. We're going. Our neighbors are going. So it's like these little, and he holds these rallies where there's 20,000 people there, and he speaks to them for an hour and a half, and they cheer every word. The enthusiasm for this man among regular Americans is truly infectious.
Look, got to ask one more question. I like Trump. I'm going to write an article, 7 reasons why I like Trump.
Yeah.
I pull my hair out at his tweets. I pull my hair out at some of the crazy things he does and stuff. But he just seems to, like he's like Mr. Magoo. He's this guy that keeps doing stuff that is impossible. Like he's went and sat down at the table with the dictator of North Korea. He's got these guys to be nice to each other and stuff. Yeah. He's got the Arabs who want to destroy Israel around the table. Presidents have been doing this for decades and have not done it. He dropped the unemployment rate to the best for 50 years. I mean, anyone else, he would have been on the front page of Time magazine, ticker tape parades, marching girls, marching bands.
And his drop-dead gorgeous wife would be on the cover of every fashion magazine every month if he was only a Democrat.
If he hasn't been on
one.
No, not one. But like, this guy is so unconventional, and yet he's the strongest, as you said, the strongest president for life that America's ever had. Probably the strongest president for the Christian faith that America's ever had. And yet he's rough as bags. So any comments about this?
I have a column up at Crisis Magazine, crisismagazine.org, just a couple of days ago, talking about just as you say, that we love Trump, and the column is really about his sense of humor. And I spent 20 years in New York City, and therefore I understand his sense of humor. And people who come from New York City understand his sense of humor. And I don't even have to make all of those. I don't like his tweets or whatever. I don't have a problem with his tweets. You know what I mean? And I don't have a problem really with almost anything he does or says. I like the guy. He makes me laugh out loud. He makes my wife laugh out loud. She'll sit and watch one of his rallies for an hour and a half and laugh her head off. This is the way that he communicates with us. So I like him, and I commend my column to you at crisismagazine.org. It's still on the homepage right now. Yeah, I call him a big galoot. We like the guy.
It's something incredibly lovable about him, isn't there? It's like this, he's got this, like he's not a politician for one single second. Like he's this guy that sort of, he's a little bit of a con artist and he talks stuff up.
Yeah.
But he's actually, and he's probably, like, I regard him as an honest criminal, but he's a very lovable criminal, because he's like the other guys, the other side are just these wicked, evil liars who smile as they put the dagger in your back.
Well,
Trump is this guy that is just who he is, what he is. Yeah.
The other night at the debate, at one point, Joe Biden turned to the camera and he talked about, when you get together, around the kitchen table tomorrow, talking about your bills and everything. And they go to Trump and he goes, he's a politician. All politicians say that. I'm not a politician. I don't talk like that, because he knew that it was phony. Phony as a $3 bill. So yeah, he's a good man. He's a good man. And I think that he has been on a journey of faith. Just the other day, he said, he said, I no longer consider myself a Presbyterian. I consider myself a non-denominational Christian, which means he considers himself an evangelical. And that is a huge, there's sort of this plain vanilla, oh, I go to a Presbyterian church or whatever, and he may or may not. But to say I'm a non-denominational Christian, holy cow, that's big.
Yeah, it is. It's big. Look, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. We honor you for your work, and thank you so much for taking time out of your Friday night family dinner, after family dinner, to talk to this crazy Australian.
It has been delightful. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, God bless you, and the Lord be with you and keep you in Jesus' name, and bless your work too.
Amen.